Welcome to my YouTube channel, Heardbreak Chronicles, a place where you will hear a large number of fascinating and intriguing chronicles about hearts that are completely broken by female betrayal. Let's not drag on for long. Let's get straight to the point. I'll never forget the moment I first felt something wasn't right. My name's Mike, and for 15 years, I thought I was living the American dream. A steady job, 2 great boys, and a loving wife, Caroline. At least, that's what I thought until the day little things started to nag at me, whispering that my picture-perfect life might not be as perfect as I believed. It all began when Caroline started acting different. She'd always been a bit of a neat freak, but lately, she was obsessed with the house being spotless. I mean, who hires a plumber 3 times in 1 month for a leaky faucet? When I asked her about it, she brushed it off, saying, "Mike, you wouldn't understand. These things have to be perfect." I didn't push her, but something about the way she avoided eye contact that day planted a seed of doubt in my mind. One evening after work, I came home to find my sons, Jason and Connor, eating pizza in the living room. Caroline wasn't there. That wasn't entirely unusual. Sometimes she went out with her girlfriends or ran errands. But this time, the boys said something that stopped me in my tracks. "Dad, Mom said we couldn't go into the basement today," Jason said, his face scrunched in confusion. "She said the plumber was fixing the pipes again." "The plumber? Again?" I muttered, my gut twisted. "Did you see him?" Connor chimed in. "Yeah, but he wasn't doing much. He was just standing around talking to Mom." They were laughing a lot. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling gnawing at my gut, but it clung to me like a shadow. I decided to let it go for the night. Maybe I was just overthinking. After all, Caroline wouldn't lie to me, right? The business trip 2 weeks later, I had to leave for a 3-day business trip out of state. Before I left, I kissed Caroline goodbye, trying to ignore the fact that she barely kissed me back. "You sure you'll be okay here?" I asked her. She smiled, almost too brightly. "Of course, Mike. We'll be fine. Don't worry about a thing." Something in her tone made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, but I ignored it. Work was hectic, and I didn't have time to dwell on my growing paranoia. While I was away, I called home to check in. Caroline answered on the first ring. "Hey, honey, how's the trip?" "Busy," I replied. "How are the boys?" "They're great. We're just watching a movie," she said, her voice light and breezy. But in the background, I thought I heard something. A man's voice? Maybe it was the TV, I told myself, though the doubt continued to simmer. The neighbor's warning when I returned home. Our neighbor, Linda, stopped me as I got out of my car. Linda was a retired schoolteacher, always peeking out of her window, keeping tabs on the neighborhood. "Mike," she began, hesitating. "I don't want to stir the pot, but I've noticed a lot of activity at your house while you've been gone." I froze. "What kind of activity?" "Well," she said, glancing toward my house, "I've seen a man coming and going several times, always during the day when the boys are at school. He's got a tool belt, so I figured he might be working on something, but it seems odd." I forced a laugh. "Probably just the plumber. Caroline's been having some work done." Linda's lips pressed into a thin line. "I thought so too, but it's strange how long he stays. Just thought you should know." The first clue that night, after the boys went to bed, I decided to check the basement myself. Caroline was already asleep, or at least pretending to be. I crept down the stairs, flipping on the light. Everything looked normal at first glance, but then I noticed something out of place. A small, crumpled receipt on the floor. Picking it up, I saw it was from a local motel. The date was from just 2 days ago. My heart thudded in my chest as I stared at the receipt. The plumber's name was scribbled on the back. Jake. I couldn't shake the feeling in my gut that something was seriously off. Finding that crumpled receipt with the name Jake scrawled on it. Well, it felt like the moment when all those little doubts I'd been ignoring started lining up, pointing straight to the truth. I didn't want to believe it, but it was staring me in the face. I shoved that receipt in my pocket and went back upstairs. Caroline was already in bed, turned away from me. Her breathing was steady, but something about how she lay there, so still, Made me wonder if she was really asleep or just avoiding me. Either way, I didn't say a word. I climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Connecting the dots the next day at work, I couldn't focus to save my life. Every time I tried to drown myself in spreadsheets or emails, that damn receipt kept creeping back into my thoughts. Jake, a motel, and Linda's warning about some guy coming by the house? It was all adding up, and not in a way that made me feel better. By lunch, I'd had enough. I opened my laptop and started digging. I typed Jake Plumber along with the name of our town, and there he was, Jake the Plumber, complete with a Facebook profile. He looked just like I'd imagined. Mid-30s, cocky grin, and clearly the kind of guy who thought he could charm his way out of anything. Scrolling through his public posts, I stopped cold when I saw one from 2 weeks ago. It was a selfie, taken in front of a house that looked suspiciously familiar. No, not just familiar, my house. The caption? Hard work pays off, but the perks make it worth it, winking face. My blood boiled as I stared at that smirk. It was like he was mocking me, right there in the open. The setup that night, I kept it together, but just barely. I told Caroline I'd be heading out of town for another work trip over the weekend. She barely looked up from her phone. Another one? You've been gone a lot lately. Yeah. Well, someone's got to keep the bills paid, right? I said, keeping my tone as casual as I could. But when I added, especially with all these plumbing repairs, I caught her flinch. It was small, barely noticeable, but it was there. That told me everything I needed to know. Over the next few days, I made my preparations. First, I got the boys squared away with my parents for the weekend. They didn't ask many questions, and I didn't offer much. Then I called up a buddy of mine who works in home security. By Friday night, I had cameras installed in the basement, the kitchen, and the living room. If Jake showed up again, I'd have him on tape. Watching it all unfold Saturday morning, I kissed Caroline goodbye like nothing was wrong. See you Monday, I said. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I drove down the street, parked around the corner, and walked back to Linda's house. From her living room window, I had a perfect view of my driveway. It didn't take long. By noon, Jake's beat-up truck rolled in like clockwork. He strolled up to the door like he owned the place, toolbox in hand. My stomach churned as Caroline greeted him with a smile that was way too warm for a simple plumber. I could feel the heat rising in my chest as they went inside. From my phone, I pulled up the live feed from the cameras. There they were, clear as day, in the kitchen, laughing, talking. She touched his arm, and he leaned in, grinning like he was king of the world. If there'd been any doubt before, it was gone now. This wasn't some misunderstanding. It wasn't in my head. It was real, and I was done pretending otherwise. Time to act. By mid-afternoon, I decided it was time. I called my dad and asked him to bring Jason and Connor back a few hours earlier than planned. He didn't ask questions, but I could tell he knew something was up. We'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. When they arrived, I was waiting at the curb. I opened the car door and looked at my boys. Stay here with Grandpa, I said, keeping my voice steady. Jason frowned. What's going on, Dad? I gave him a quick smile, though I'm sure it looked forced. Just stay in the car, buddy. I'll explain later. I turned back toward the house, every muscle in my body coiled tight. My key slid into the lock, and I pushed the door open. Whatever was waiting for me on the other side, I was ready for it. The moment I stepped into the house, I could feel something was off. The faint sound of laughter floated from the living room, carefree and loud enough to make my blood boil. My fists clenched as I shut the door behind me, the slam loud and deliberate. It wasn't subtle. I wanted them to know I was there. I walked toward the living room, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. When I turned the corner, I saw them. Caroline was sitting on the couch, leaning in close to him. Jake, the guy I'd only seen in smug Facebook selfies, was sitting with one arm lazily draped over the back of the couch, a grin plastered across his face. They hadn't even noticed me yet. Cozy, aren't we? I said, my voice cutting through the air like a knife. Both of them froze. Caroline shot up from the couch, her face instantly pale. Mike, what are you doing here? I thought you were out of town. I interrupted, my voice icy. Yeah, I bet you did. Jake stood, his smirk fading. He was bigger than I'd expected, broad-shouldered and cocky, but I didn't care. He raised his hands like he was calming a wild animal. Look, man, this isn't what it looks like. Not what it looks like? I barked out a laugh, my temper snapping. You're sitting on my couch, laughing with my wife, and you think I'm stupid enough to believe this is innocent? Mike, please let me explain, Caroline pleaded, stepping between us. It's not what you think. Oh, shut up, Caroline, I roared, my voice echoing through the house. I've seen the motel receipts. I've seen the Facebook posts. You think I didn't know? You think I didn't see you two acting like this was your little love nest? The fight breaks out. Jake stepped forward, trying to act tough. All right, man, you've made your point. I'm leaving. Oh no, you're not going anywhere just yet, I snapped, stepping closer until we were face to face. You think you can walk into my house, screw around with my wife, and just leave like nothing happened? Jake's eyes narrowed. Listen, buddy, this doesn't have to get ugly. Before he could finish, I shoved him hard, sending him stumbling back into the coffee table. He caught himself, but the cocky grin was gone. You want to fight over this? He growled, stepping back toward me. Mike, stop! Caroline screamed, trying to push between us, but I wasn't listening. Jake threw the first punch, catching me off guard and landing a shot to my jaw. The pain was sharp, but it only fueled my anger. I tackled him, driving him into the couch as we grappled. Furniture clattered to the ground, and Caroline's screams became background noise. I landed a punch to his ribs, and he gasped, swinging wildly but missing. Get out of my house, I shouted, grabbing him by the shirt and slamming him into the wall. Jake shoved me back, his breathing ragged. Fine, you want me gone? I'm gone. He grabbed his toolbox and staggered toward the door, blood trickling from his lip. You can keep her, man. She's not worth it. That was the breaking point. I lunged at him again, but Caroline grabbed my arm, pulling me back with a desperate cry. Stop it, Mike. Just let him leave. Jake didn't wait around. He bolted out the door, his toolbox banging against his leg as he ran to his truck. The engine roared to life, and he peeled out of the driveway, leaving tire marks on the pavement. The fallout against the house was a wreck, broken furniture, scuffed walls, and the echo of Jake's truck fading into the distance. I stood there, breathing hard, my fists clenched. Caroline stood a few feet away, trembling, tears streaming down her face. Mike, she whispered. Don't, I said, cutting her off. Don't you dare try to explain this. You brought him into our house, our home. You humiliated me. You lied to me. And for what? Some guy who doesn't even respect you enough to stick around. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't care. I turned toward the door, just as I heard another car pull up outside. It was my dad, bringing Jason and Connor home earlier than planned. Stay here, I told Caroline, my voice cold. You don't get to face them yet. The boys find out I stepped outside and saw Jason and Connor climbing out of the car. My dad gave me a concerned look, clearly sensing the tension. Everything all right, Mike? He asked. No, I said bluntly. But it will be. Jason frowned. Dad, what's going on? Why do you look like you've been in a fight? I hesitated, not sure how to explain this to a 14-year-old and his little brother. Go inside with Grandpa, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. Your mom and I need to talk. Connor tugged on my sleeve. Is Mom okay? She's fine, I said, my stomach twisting. Just go inside. As they walked in, I knew there was no hiding this from them for long. Caroline's betrayal had shattered more than just my trust. It had cracked the foundation of our family, and I wasn't sure it could ever be repaired. The moment I stepped back inside, the tension in the house was suffocating. Jason and Connor stood near the door, looking confused and worried. Caroline was still in the living room, tears streaking her face. She looked up when she saw the boys, her mouth opening to speak, but I cut her off. Not a word, I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. Boys, go to your room for now. I need to talk to your mother. Jason hesitated, his eyes darting between us. Dad, what's going on? Why does the house look like this? Jason, I said firmly, just go upstairs. Please. He looked like he wanted to argue, but Connor grabbed his arm, and they both headed to their room. Once they were gone, I turned to Caroline, the weight of everything crashing down on me. The confrontation deepens, all right? I said, folding my arms. You've got one chance to explain this, and it better be the truth. Caroline wiped her face with trembling hands, her voice cracking as she spoke. Mike, I never meant for it to get this far. Started out, I don't know, innocent. Innocent. I barked out a laugh, bitter and loud. You call sneaking around with a guy while I'm busting my ass at work innocent? Don't insult me, Caroline. She flinched but kept going. It was just, I felt lonely, Mike. You're always working, always stressed. And Jake, he made me feel seen. Seen. I shouted, my anger boiling over. You needed some stranger to see you? What about me? What about our boys? Did you even think about them? Or were you too busy sneaking off to motels to care? She broke down again, but this time I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. I was wrong, okay? I was stupid, and I don't know what to say. I never wanted to hurt you. Well, congratulations, I said coldly. You did. The boys overhear from upstairs. I heard a faint creak. I turned and saw Jason standing at the top of the stairs, his face pale. Dad, are you and Mom fighting? My heart sank. I hadn't wanted the boys to see any of this, but the damage was already done. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to calm down. Jason, go back to your room. We'll talk about this later. No, he said, his voice trembling. I want to know what's going on. Connor appeared behind him, his small face full of confusion. Why are you yelling at Mom? Caroline started to speak, but I held up a hand to stop her. Jason, Connor, I said, keeping my voice steady. Your mom and I are going through something right now. It's complicated. But I promise you, I'll explain everything soon. Jason stared at me for a long moment before nodding slowly. Okay, he said quietly, taking Connor by the hand and leading him back to their room. A decision is made when the boys were gone. I turned back to Caroline. You need to leave. Her eyes widened in shock. What? Mike, no, please. Let's talk about this. We can fix it. Fix it. I shook my head, laughing bitterly. There's nothing left to fix, Caroline. You broke this. You broke us. I'm not going to let you stay here and pretend everything's fine. Where am I supposed to go? She cried, her voice desperate. I don't care, I said, my voice hard. Call Jake. Call whoever you want. But you're not staying in this house. She collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, but I didn't budge. After a long, tense silence, she stood and walked upstairs, her footsteps heavy. When she came back down, she was holding a small suitcase. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I didn't reply. I just opened the door and waited for her to walk through it. When she did, I closed it behind her, leaning against it as the weight of everything hit me like a freight train. The unexpected twist that night, after I got the boys to bed, I sat in the living room, staring at the mess Jake had left behind. My phone buzzed, and for a moment, I thought it might be Caroline. But when I picked it up, the number was unfamiliar. Hello, I answered, my voice hoarse. The voice on the other end was low and tense. Is this Mike? Yeah. Who's this? There was a pause before the man replied. This is Jake's brother. We need to talk. I froze, the blood draining from my face. What about? It's about Jake, he said. And Caroline. You don't know the whole story. I sat in my living room, gripping the phone as Jake's brother spoke on the other end. His voice was calm but carried a weight that made my stomach twist. Mike, he said. You don't know everything about Jake and Caroline. I think you deserve to hear the truth. Then spit it out, I snapped. I've had enough games. There was a pause and then he dropped the first bombshell. Jake didn't just stumble into your life. He was sent. Sent. I echoed, my blood running cold. What the hell are you talking about? Caroline didn't just meet Jake, he explained. She sought him out. Jake's been in this, let's call it a business. Women like Caroline contact him when they want to test their husbands or find leverage. It's not just an affair. It's a setup. A setup, I whispered, feeling the room spin around me. She hired Jake to push you, he said, to see how far you'd go, to see if she could justify leaving you. The betrayal deepens, my mind reeled. Every interaction, every lie, every damn receipt. It wasn't just a betrayal of love. It was calculated. I slammed my fist on the coffee table, my voice shaking with fury. So what? She wanted to destroy our marriage just for kicks. It wasn't for kicks, he said. It was for money. Money, I barked. What money? Look, I don't know all the details, Jake's brother admitted. But from what I overheard, she's been planning this for a while. Something about your assets, the house, the kids. She was building a case to make you look unstable. Jake didn't even know half of it. He just thought it was another job. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. My mind flashed back to every argument. Every time she dismissed me. Every moment I'd thought I was the one failing this family. She wasn't just cheating. She was orchestrating an escape plan. The confrontation the next morning, Caroline called. I let it ring, then sent her a text. Come back to the house. We need to talk. She arrived an hour later, her eyes puffy from crying. Mike, I know you're angry, but save it. I interrupted, my tone cold. We're past apologies, Caroline. I pulled out the crumpled motel receipt and slid it across the table. You're going to explain everything, and you're going to start with Jake. Her face went pale. I don't know what you're. Don't lie to me again, I said, my voice rising. Jake's brother called me. I know about your little arrangement. I know you hired him. The color drained from her face, and she sank into the chair. Mike, I didn't mean for it to go this far. Go this far, I shouted, slamming my fist on the table. You hired someone to seduce you and ruin our marriage. And for what? Money? Custody of the boys? What kind of person does that? Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't care. Her remorse was too little, too late. The final twist as Caroline stammered out excuses. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a folder. I've been busy too, I said, sliding it across the table. This is a copy of everything. The texts, the receipts, the footage from the cameras I installed. It's all here. Her eyes widened in horror. You! That's right, I said, cutting her off. I've got enough evidence to bury you in court. You want to ruin me? Guess what, Caroline? You just ruined yourself. Her tears turned to anger. You can't do this, Mike. You'll destroy everything. No, I said, standing up and towering over her. You destroyed everything. And now you're going to live with the consequences. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a process server holding an envelope. Michael Turner? He asked. That's me. He handed me the envelope, nodded, and walked away. I opened it and froze. It was a legal notice, a restraining order. Caroline stood behind me, her expression unreadable. Mike, I didn't want it to come to this, but you forced my hand. What the hell is this? I demanded. She crossed her arms. It's over, Mike. You're not taking the boys. You're not taking the house. I've already spoken to my lawyer. The unexpected resolution, but she didn't realize I'd planned for this. I pulled out my phone and played the recording of our conversation, the one where she admitted to hiring Jake, to setting me up, to trying to frame me. Her confident smirk faltered as the weight of her words sank in. You think you've got it all figured out, don't you? I said. But this recording, it's all going to the judge. You won't just lose custody, you'll lose everything. Her face crumpled, but I didn't feel a shred of pity. Get out of my house, Caroline, I said quietly. And don't come back. The aftermath: a month later, the divorce was finalized. I got full custody of the boys, the house, and the satisfaction of knowing that Caroline's schemes had backfired spectacularly. As for Jake, I never saw him again, though I heard his business dried up after the truth came out. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again, and for the first time in years I felt free. The boys and I started fresh, rebuilding what Caroline had tried to destroy. She may have thought she was playing the game, but in the end, she lost everything. Thank you very much for listening to this story to the end. I hope you liked. We work for you, looking for and telling you the most effective stories about women's betrayal, shocking intrigue, interweaving the plot and unexpected reactions of angry men. Save us, put likes, write comments, and, of course, subscribe to the channel to not miss any story.